Speaker, in preparing the statement which she has said was agreed in Rome on the Gulf, was the Prime Minister aware of the publicly available estimates made by the American Chiefs of Staff that within 12 days of combat, 30,000 Allied casualties, of which 10,000 would be fatalities? If she disagrees with those American estimates, what estimates have been made by the British Chiefs of Staff?
Mr. Speaker, I remember when this country had to send forces down to the Falklands. The Chiefs of Staff were frequently asked what were their estimates of casualties. There is no one who can make such an estimate. No one at all. There is no one who can make such an estimate. There are people who can guess, and the guesses turned out before to be very wide of the mark. And it is not a question which I ask because I know of the impossibility of answering it.
Mr. Jonathan Aitken.
May I congratulate my right honourable friend on the valiant stand she has been taking to fight for Britain's economic and parliamentary independence in Europe. And may I ask her to emphasise the point that standing alone from the 11's plan for EMU may bring positive economic benefits to Britain. Would she not agree that the country which has the strongest currency in Europe, one of the highest per capita incomes in Europe, one of the strongest financial services industry in Europe, is economically and politically independent Switzerland? And will she therefore not agree that economic independence is no barrier to economic success?
I totally agree with my honourable friend. Switzerland has a marvellous record, both as far as her currency is concerned and as far as her manufacturing and services are concerned. And we, of course, will continue to do so if other people go for a single currency and we stay outside.
Radice.
The Right Honourable Lady has referred to the 11 other European leaders as living in cloud cuckoo land, but hasn't it occurred to her that she might perhaps be living in cloud cuckoo land if she thinks that the majority of the British people are likely to go along with her short-sighted proposals on economic and monetary union, which are likely to lead Britain into being excluded from Europe's first division?
No, I think that is totally wrong. But I note that the honourable member believes in a single currency, regardless of its consequences on this country, regardless of how much we have to transfer, regardless of the enormous consequences for our securities and the many, many consequences which would follow. I do not believe that his view is shared by many of the people, and that we indeed will see. But I think he will find that most people prefer to have the pound sterling and prefer to have our parliament. But if he doesn't wish to have either, why does he want to come here after the next election?
Arnold!
Would my right honourable friend continue to bear in mind that the success of the Uruguay round of the GATT is vital to the economies of the new democracies in Latin America and elsewhere? Does she not agree with me that fine words in Rome butter no tortillas?
I agree. We could always talk about the generalities. When it came to getting down to a detailed negotiation, they didn't even want to address the subject there. They ran away from it. And then they said that they should set a stage 2 without having decided what the content of stage 2. We don't know what we're going to do in stage 2 yet, but they set a date for it. That is very different from what Delors said in his report, when he said quite clearly the conditions for moving from stage to stage cannot be defined precisely in advance, nor is it possible to foresee today when those conditions will be realized. So the setting of explicit deadlines is therefore not advisable. What a pity he didn't stick to that particular advice but tried to change it at the last meeting in Rome.
Diane Abbott.
On the question of the hostages, will the Prime Minister accept that many hundreds of families in this country, including my own constituent, Mrs. Maggie Ross, whose husband Alistair Ross, has been held held hostage at a military installation for 3 months, will have listened with great care to what she had to say, and what, in particular, what she said about there being no question of negotiation. And many of those hundreds of families will have been bitterly disappointed, because although they may understand her reasons, many of them fear that where military adventurism is concerned, the lives of the hostages are expendable.
I always understand people's anxiety about relatives who are hostages. I, perhaps in my constituency, have been fortunate in that we were able to welcome home again a young girl aged 12. Of course one understands that. But if we were to take that we could never, never take action against a brutal dictator because he held hostages, we should never, never take action against such a dictator, and he would be free to continue his ways, because he would always take a few more hostages to prevent justice being done and to prevent territory and people's homes being recovered.
Grills.
Would my right honourable friend not agree that the prosperity of all the people within the EEC is much more likely to be achieved by the successful achievement of a market without barriers, with a single market without barriers, than dreaming dreams of a federal Europe, as right honourable gentleman member for Devonport so courageously said earlier this afternoon? And would my right honourable friend never stop reminding her colleagues in Europe that Britain has actually implemented more of the single market measures than any other country, and therefore we have been the best proponents for prosperity in Europe?
I agree with my honourable friend. Indeed, part of the reason for founding the Treaty of Rome was not only to get down barriers within the 6 countries that joined it at the time, but to be an example to the rest of the world, to get down barriers without as well, so that we should genuinely have much freer trade and a much freer flow of trade, usually nearest to the benefit of trading countries and also to third world countries. It is therefore vital that we complete the single market and the Uruguay round. We have got on fairly well with the directives. My honourable friend's recollection is correct. Ourselves and Denmark have not only passed the directives, but have implemented most of them. We have only 15 or 16 to implement. Denmark is 15. But as I indicated, the record of the rest of the community varies very much in spite of the grand words. When it comes to the practical deeds, they don't match up to the grand words. And the chair was taken by Italy, and Italy has yet to implement some 62 directives. Perhaps that explains why we went to grand words and not to specific practical suggestions.
Stuart Bell.
In one of the emollient passages of her speech, her statement earlier, the Prime Minister said that she believed solutions could be found for the community so that it could advance as 12. As the Prime Minister is aware, changes to the treaty are required in order to advance monetary and economic union. These amendments to the treaty will come forward at the intergovernmental conferences in December. Is she now telling the House that she will not be using her veto power at those conferences?
We have been through one intergovernmental conference before. That was the one which led to the Single European Act, which the honourable member will recall. It started off with very grandiose and rather vague designs. It finished up as a very, very much more modest document which we were able to sign up to. Now, I believe that that is what will happen in the intergovernmental conferences here. I believe that many, when they look more closely at it, will not want to have a single currency unless they can have enormous transfers of money, and I do not think that those will be forthcoming. I think that many will look at some of the other divestment of powers and not want to do that. Undoubtedly, there are some who are prepared to divest their powers and put them over to someone else. They would prefer not necessarily to have the responsibility for some of the difficult things that have to be done. But I believe that most of the nation states would prefer to keep their nationality and their national identity, and therefore there will in fact be a very great deal of negotiating, and as the honourable member said, you can only have a new treaty if all parliaments ratify it.
John Brown.
With my right